Today, I'm excited to welcome Michael Ringle to the Legacy of Love podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Eckline. So, Michael is dedicated to empowering families with children with special needs and helping them protect, grow, and enjoy their wealth with confidence. His work and firm focuses on educating families about the critical aspects of planning for their loved one's future, including special needs trust, able accounts, retirement planning, and ensuring financial security for not one, but two lifetimes. So, in this episode, we discuss the importance of financial planning for families with special needs children, with a special focus on planning for two lifetimes, ensuring both parents and their children are financially secure, both now and for that next generation. So, we'll explore essential tools and strategies to navigate long term care, funding options, and how to create a comprehensive plan that provides lasting peace of mind for parents. Michael's compassionate approach makes this complex topic accessible and really providing families with the knowledge they need to make informed, intentional decisions. I'm excited to dive into this conversation and learn from his expertise. You'll want to check out the show notes. There is a link to book a consult with him if you're interested. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Michael Ringle, welcome to the Legacy of Love podcast. I'm so happy you're here with me.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Sarah. I really appreciate it. I look forward to chatting with you and sharing some great information.
Likewise. So, we both have kind of a love and expertise in serving kind of, I guess, the same clients and
Yeah.
community of special needs trusts, and there's so much to know. So, before we kind of dive into all things special needs trusts and planning for that,
Yeah.
I would love for listeners to hear kind of what brought you to this work originally.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, just a little bit about who I am. I'm a father of two beautiful girls, and we also have six dogs.
Wow.
So, all rescue, and my wife and I volunteer for a dog rescue here in New Jersey, and we bring dogs up from the South who need homes, get them fostered, and finally get them adopted. I've been a financial advisor for over 20 years, originally a CPA, dangerous enough to know a lot about taxes and accounting, but I don't file tax returns. I mean, to me, that's, looking at the past and what happened, and I'm more of a proactive planner. And about 20 years ago, when I got into this industry, I noticed a few of our relatives who have children on the autism spectrum somewhere, whether they're high functioning or not. There's a lot of detail that needs to be involved in their planning.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was that they have to plan for two lifetimes. Most of us, right, with neurotypical children, we have the choice, right? We can typically plan for ourselves. I've come across all different types of people who say, well, my kids will be okay. I'm just going to worry about me. Those are people I don't even work with because, I work with people
Yeah.
who are really love their families. And I noticed that these families must plan for two lifetimes.
Oh,
And they're so overwhelmed with what goes on in their day-to-day lives from dealing with school and therapy and doctor's appointments and travel. And what if they have other children as well and their sports that they know that the work that we do is important, but it's just not urgent.
yeah.
And so I just saw it as a responsibility to work with families to say, okay, how do we make it urgent? How do we get things in place so that if something happens, when it happens, everybody's going to be okay financially?
Oh,
And so I started watching what some of our other family members did. In fact, my wife's family were pioneers in how they dealt with housing for their son, and I could talk about that a little bit later. And as I started working with more and more families, I found it personally gratifying that I knew that I was making a difference in people's lives. And so I wanted to make sure that I started working with people that the work that I did was impactful. It empowered them to be able to protect, grow, and really enjoy their wealth. And so I built a team of other advisors, and we have a national practice. We speak all around the country on this topic, and I'm excited to be here with you today.
Oh, what a powerful story. And that's so much of also why I love serving in this area of special needs trusts. I mean, there's without question, I see what relief professionals like us can bring to families. And I'm also what's kind of fun about having this conversation is that I'm just coming back from attending a 3-day conference all about special needs trust. So it's top of mind.
Mhm.
More than half of my fiduciary practice, so half of my trusts are special needs trusts. So this is really kind of an area of focus for me as well. And of course, I sit and, go to conferences and read all the
Mhm.
books and connect with other professionals, but I have never heard anyone say it quite the way that you said it, which I so appreciate
Mm.
and really hits me, not only as a professional, but as a mother of the need and requirement for families with children with some sort of disability and special needs that they have to plan not only for their lifetime, but their child. And boy, that really hits you.
It does. It does. And what I've seen is that when families come to us, in fact, I was speaking to a family today that they started asking their friends who are financial advisors, how can you help me? How can you help me? And they basically said, we don't know. We don't
Wow.
know how we could help you. So there are people looking for resources to be able to provide education, provide guidance, share with them, what's possible. I was talking to another family, actually a few of them, and they were really proud that, they're working with a private client group at a big bank in New York. And they were boasting about, oh, I work with a private client group. I work with a private client group. And I said, that's awesome. You should be very proud of that. But let me ask you a question. Do they know you have a child with special needs? And they said, yeah. I said, well, what are they doing to address the concerns from planning for two lifetimes and from an estate planning point of view? Well, they don't, we're not nothing. We're going to get to it. I said, well, what does that mean? It means that they don't know what they're doing. And so
Mhm.
their what I call plan right now, or their default future, is going to cause problems for their family for receiving government benefits in the future. And so what we do is we meet with people and find out where they are financially, no judgment, right? People are where they are. You got here, we're here, let's have the conversation. And then let me share with you what's possible. Most families we come across, we work with, don't know that it's even possible for the parents to have a great life financially during their lifetime and in their retirement and be able to leave a boatload of money to eventually fund the special needs trust. And once we share that with them and we share with them that, the work that we do complements the legal work, that they're going to be okay. And that to me is what everybody wants to know is, am I going to be okay? And if they do the right work proactively, they should be.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the sweet spots with special needs trusts is that if you do the planning right, if you create that correct plan and correct team, what's nice is that typically, the whole purpose of the special needs trust is that there is other resources available to that beneficiary. And so then the special needs trust isn't, paying for everything.
Right.
And, when we're looking at someone's lifespan, that really makes a huge impact, regardless, of whether they're receiving disability or
Yep.
SSI, Medi-Cal, Medicaid. Obviously, this is going to be different and depending on what state you are in.
Sure.
California, we have the regional center, which is just a huge benefit for
Okay.
our parents with developmental disabilities. And they could even be providing 24/7 care sometimes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's where it's just can be just a huge benefit. So your firm is providing financial planning for families. I would love to start off of kind of when a client comes and decides to work with you, what kind of information are you asking for up front?
Yeah,
I'm assuming that maybe asking about public benefits is a piece, but there
it
must be
is.
a lot more.
There is. Yes, the first thing we do is we get to ask questions and learn about them and their family. Like, share with me a little bit about, the family, about the kids. A lot of times families share with me the diagnosis and, what the prognosis is for lifetime care or not. So we start talking about them and more importantly, what are they trying to accomplish? And most of the time, it's they want to take care of their child. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why they come to us. They just don't know how to do it financially, right? And as I mentioned before, they're just so overwhelmed with what's going on, day to day that they know this is important. They just don't make it urgent. So the first thing we do is try to get to know them as people and as a family and, what are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to achieve? And how to break it down. Like what's most important to them. And they heard the term special needs trust. They don't know the difference between a first party trust or a pooled trust or a third
Third
party
party.
trust.
Yeah.
They heard the term able account, right? They don't know if they should have one, they should not have one. We talk about money that's in their child's name already and what their default, we call the default future. If they continue doing what they're doing, if they have money in their child's name when they turn 18, right? Well, that's going to be deemed a resource for them and could disqualify them from receiving SSI and Medicaid and whatever other benefits,
Yeah.
right? They want to know, they've heard terms about life insurance, what kind of life insurance, what type of life insurance. I can't afford life insurance, or I can't afford not to get it. Life insurance to me is a financial tool to help people accomplish what they want to accomplish,
Well,
right?
my thought is for these families in particular that that might be even more of a better tool to use.
Look, it is no doubt the most efficient and effective way to eventually fund a special needs trust,
Yeah.
right? Most of the families that we work with, they know that the parents are typically going to pay for, supplementing their child's care while they're here. They're concerned what happens when the parents aren't here.
And that's where things become so expensive
Yeah,
because typically, like that's one of my questions with my clients in the planning phase and especially my, parents with, children with some sort of disability is okay, what are you doing? What is the team in place for the adult children?
sure.
Are they still living with you? And when there really isn't much of a team and,
Right.
mom and dad are doing everything, that's when I know like, okay, this is going to be either a costly because their child doesn't qualify for benefits, or we need to start being proactive and building that team and not waiting
Yeah,
till a crisis. And unfortunately, I've seen those cases where mom did everything, didn't even acknowledge that there was a disability,
right.
and then having to go back and build that team and get the beneficiary on benefits that they could
Yep.
have always received.
Yeah, people ask me when's the best time to do planning, and I say the analogy I like to use is, the best time to plant an oak tree was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? The second best time is today.
Yeah.
Like take some action, do
Yeah.
something proactive. And so when families come to us or we have conversations with them, the first step in our planning process is to help them get organized financially,
Mm,
right? What do you got? And there's no judgment, right? You are where you are. And most people's financial world, it's like a junk drawer in the kitchen, right?
yeah.
We just acquire stuff. In fact, I got two junk drawers downstairs, right? We get sold a product, we have company benefits. Somebody says you need to buy some insurance. Somebody says, you should do this, and people do it. You should get a Roth. So many IRAs, all these different things that there's people don't know where their money is. They don't know how much is coming in, how much is going out, how much free cash flow they might have to invest, save, spend, or give away. And so what we do is we get them organized and say, okay, here's a tool that we use to build a balance sheet, to understand what are the assets you have, what do you owe, liabilities, what's the cash flow look like, and what's the protection look like. And I don't mean just protection for life and disability, right? Because parents need to think about that as well. They also need to think about eventually long-term care for themselves because if the parents become sick and they need care, where's the money going to come from? Who's going to pay for it? So you need to start planning there as well. We also need to think about things as simple as auto insurance or homeowners insurance or an umbrella policy. Because if loss happens, it's going to affect your balance sheet. It affects your balance sheet and it affects your income. It's going to affect your family. So what we want to do is we want to get financially organized and say, okay, here's what you have. And then what we want to do is talk about protecting the most important financial resource that a family has. And it's their ability to create income for their families.
Mm.
So through corporate benefits or individual plans, what are families doing to make sure that if something happens to either spouse, that income doesn't stop? Making sure they have the right disability coverage, making sure they have enough life insurance, right? Eventually, we want that to be permanent because it has to show up someday. When parents are 70, 80, 90 years old, that's the best mechanism to fund a special needs trust. But they might not have the cash flow to acquire that today. So term insurance is awesome because it provides coverage. So we're concerned with how much do you have? If you don't have what we call human life value, right, then we help them get that. And then we share with them the different types of policies that are out there. They've heard a lot of different things about whole life and universal life and index universal life and term that we share with them. Well, maybe they could build a portfolio of different insurance products, just like they would build a portfolio of stocks and bonds and mutual funds. But at least they have the coverage for now. And then we work on cash flow, understanding how much money's coming into their financial world, how much is going out, and how much can they save. And I'm not interested in helping people create a budget because budgets don't work.
Yeah.
We all hate budgets. January 1, we're on a budget. January 2nd, we're off budget, right? It's like a diet. New Year's comes along and I'm going to the gym and then I'm not going to the gym, right? We want a spending plan. We just need to know macro how much is coming in, how much is going out. I'm not the advisor, and there are a lot of books out there like this who say, you know what? You shouldn't spend 10 bucks a day in Starbucks because if you just save that money over a certain amount of time, if you save it, you'll have $1 million. What do you think's wrong with that scenario?
I mean, I think especially with special needs families where
Yeah,
it's like there's such a need, right? That
yeah.
and like with these small purchases, it's really missing the big picture.
Exactly. So if you're working hard, right, and
Yeah.
you're sacrificing for your family, and like I live in New Jersey and I used to work in Manhattan. You used to get up, take the bus. It was, it was long days. We work hard. You want to spend
Yeah.
money on special treats for yourself that you deserve? Absolutely.
Well, and especially if you're, the primary caregiver and
Yeah,
caregiving to your child with disability, or you're navigating the whole care team and oh my gosh, fighting for public benefits. I mean, all of it, it's exhausting. It's
go
so
get yourself a
much. Yeah.
massage. Spend
Yeah.
spend the money,
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you're the primary caregiver, you need to take some time for yourself as well.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm not sure about California, but some of the here in New Jersey, I was talking to families in Minnesota, in Colorado. They have programs where the parents could get paid by the state to take care of their child.
Yeah, that's IHSS here. Yeah, and
Yeah,
so the minute you qualify for, in California Medi-Cal, that's when for the most part, it triggers that eligibility for IHSS. And that can be a huge benefit for families, especially like that, if one of the parents are providing care and at least you're getting something, you're getting paid for
Right.
something. It's still like basically minimum
Yeah.
wage, but
Right.
when you total up the hours
Sure.
end of the month, it really can make a huge difference for families. So
Yeah, that's really
I
important.
can tell that you're really looking at things comprehensively. I'm assuming you have an extensive network, right? Of of
Yeah.
knowing what this specific family and client might need to be partnered with. When you're working with families, are you finding more so that they've already worked with an estate planning attorney and have already established a special needs trust, or a lot of times even that hasn't happened, and then you're partnering with them with a
Yeah.
professional? That's
Yeah,
great.
most of the families that I speak to, whether it's at conferences that we are invited to speak at, whether they're webinars. In fact, for an organization last month, we held a webinar called Planning for the Special Individual in Your Life. It was an
Mm.
hour-long conversation about this topic. And I put up a survey that said, do you have a special needs trust? And 87% of the families that participated said no.
Wow.
Like everybody else, they know it exists. They may have it in their in the language of their wills.
Hmm.
This is my opinion. I mean, you're the attorney and the professional. I like to see standalone special needs trusts
Yeah.
with its own EIN number so that unfunded, right? Because once you fund it with money for your child, number one, that money needs to be used for your child and has certain restrictions to it. But also, you have to file a tax return if there's any growth on that money. And who wants to file a tax return and pay taxes on that? So I typically like to see unfunded special needs trust. But if a family member, grandparents, somebody is going to leave money when they pass, well, the families need to have a conversation with them. They say they can't leave it outright to their child. They need to name the special needs trust as the beneficiary of the parents, the grandparents' estate plan, or friends' estate plan. They can't
Yeah.
leave it outright.
Ellen Cookman, it's going to be an episode that airs, I think, probably the week or maybe 2 weeks before. I don't know if you know Ellen Cookman, but she's also an estate planning attorney that specializes in SNTs. But
Right.
how she kind of distinguished, because what I see, I'm also not an attorney, I'm just a fiduciary, but
Oh, okay.
sorry, just wanted to clarify that. But how she kind of distinguished it, and when she recommends the clients, between going with a standalone special needs trust versus kind of written in and embedded in like the
Yep.
family's, revocable living trust, is if you know that your child like has a clear disability and is receiving like public benefits, there's no question that an SNT will be needed, then that's when it makes sense to go that route. And
Yep.
then she said, for our clients, where it might be a question mark, let's see how this child kind of grows and
Yeah.
evolves and how capable they are. Then they'll use language kind of within the living trust so that, in the event that it needs to be established, it can be. But it doesn't make sense to kind of set it up that way if it's more of a question. So that kind of made
Right. Yeah, that's
sense to
great.
me. Yeah, and the administrator, for me, I'm kind of downstream to where
Yeah.
you are, where I'm the one that's administering these trusts and acting as trustee. And so what I appreciated with Ellen's kind of explanation with that was like knowing, oh, okay, this is why, sometimes I do have that standalone SNT and sometimes it's not. It's just embedded in the living trust. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's really important to distinguish between both of them.
yeah, it's great to know that there's, what I'm thinking, financial advisors that really focus on serving these families because it's so needed and it really does get complicated. I'm guessing that you also, well, obviously you're not a public benefit specialist, you
Right.
probably know and know of people and make the referral for
Sure.
families because I'm sure that that can kind of be another piece. I know I'm based in Silicon Valley and I work with a lot of very high net worth clients. And what I have seen before is like, oh, we have plenty of money
Right.
and we don't need to worry about public benefits. We don't need a special needs trust.
Right.
But when you start asking questions, and
Hmm.
also if this person requires 24/7 care, what I've seen is even the largest estates can really be drained when you're looking at that lifetime.
Sure.
So that's where I think education is like so much part of the work that we do. So I, applaud
Yeah.
you for having a larger reach of nationally. For me, I'm primarily only focused in the state of California.
It's interesting you mentioned that. So when we teach people about the different choices they have when it comes to estate planning, right? There are three. The first is the one you just mentioned, right? If there's enough money, or people perceive that there's enough money, a large amount of money, because nobody knows how much healthcare is going to cost for your child, how much housing is going to cost, you know, then you could leave everything outright and that'll disqualify them from receiving government benefits. Most people don't fit that description or want that. But even if you have a significant amount of wealth, if you have the ability to protect it, maybe use it for other things. So, for example, like if they had a special needs trust and they use their wealth to purchase life insurance, like a boatload of life insurance to
Mhm.
fund the trust, then they could use their money for other things. They could use it for themselves. They could use it
Mm.
for charity. They could use it for other organizations. And so, yeah, I mean, you could fund it yourself, but why wouldn't you want to leverage, right, the use of financial tools to have even more? We were working with one of our families who has a significant amount of wealth, and we were discussing the potential taxes that they're going to owe or their children are going to owe when they receive their inheritance based on tax laws today. I mean, there's qualified money that's in 401ks and profit sharing plans. There are certain type of annuities that are going to get taxed, and the taxes are going to be in the six and seven figures. And it's going to come from somewhere, and the government's going to want their money.
Yep.
So either it's going to come from your pot, that means less for your child, or it can come from an insurance company. And so by giving the insurance company a little bit of money over time, you can create a solution so that the insurance company pays, basically that money pays the taxes, your child gets everything else. And so you could have even more. I mean, it's just a matter of leverage. But that's one of the strategies. The other is people can disinherit their child. And what I mean by that is they could leave everything to somebody else, another child, a relative, a friend. So there's no money in your child with a disability. But the problem is that that money's not protected. It's not protected from creditors. It's not protected from lawsuit. It's not protected from divorce. It's not protected from somebody just taking the money and spending it somewhere else on their family, on their friends, gambling, drugs, you name it. So disinheriting is not a great strategy. So the logical step is to create a special needs plan, is to create a special needs trust, a third party special needs trust that is going to be funded someday. And that will be used for, supplementing the Social Security and the Medicaid and other benefits that, your child who eventually turns into an adult is going to use. And that other money could be used to equalize the estate. What if you have more than one child? Most families I work with,
That was actually one of my questions for
yeah,
you because I find that a lot in my practice where, there's one child with a disability and then
right,
their other child or children don't.
right,
And I think a lot of parents initially think, oh, everything's going to be equal. And then when they sit down with their estate planning attorney, I am finding that that's usually needing to be evaluated because while the child with a disability may not be able to work or, fully be able to earn the same as the other siblings, and when we're planning for, the cost of care and everything, that's going to be
right.
obviously a lot more. So,
Yeah,
how to kind of plan for that and, making things feel fair. And that's where, again, I think
sure.
building a team, planning, and also for families to have these conversations is so important.
I think that's really important is to have the conversations with, the other family members and the other children who eventually will become adults. And, some of the things that we've seen is, when parents have, multiple children and one of them has a disability, the question is, well, who's going to take care of the child with a disability?
Yeah.
Some parents feel that it's the obligation of the other children to take care of them, and that hopefully they'll leave enough money for them to do that. Other families believe that, you know, every child should have the opportunity to pursue whatever they want to pursue with the hope that they'll take care of, their sibling. I mean, one of the pioneers in our family, one of my wife's relatives, 40 years ago, they purchased a home for their son and three other housemates, all of whom have disabilities. Right?
Wow. How wonderful.
They all have high autism. They're all high functioning, and I would say mid functioning, not high functioning, but they need 24-hour care, someone in the home. So they bring in someone in the home. They own the home. And cousin Jeffrey is living a phenomenal life. He's 53, 54 years old, and he works, he plays sports, he's got friends, and they solve their housing issue by them actually buying a house.
We actually have a local nonprofit, and this is exactly what they're kind of have designed. It's called Legacy Homes. They're only specific in the Bay Area though.
Yeah,
And I love it because it solves a lot of problems for parents. It's definitely not for everyone,
sure.
but the beautiful piece is that housing for your child's lifetime is covered. And then the other piece is that you're building that kind of community and support and then care. And I just love hearing these kind of like out of the
Yeah,
box, ways of solving these really hard problems for families. So that's
yeah,
wonderful. You said that's your wife's family?
yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So he is living his best life
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
His brothers, who are very protective of him, both had their own families and their kids and their grandkids, and they're living their best life. They take a high level of responsibility for Jeffrey, but the parents were proactive enough to notice that each one of them should be able to thrive on their own and at the same time be a comprehensive unit. Some families don't feel that way. So, again, no judgment, but financially, how are you going to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish?
Yeah.
People need to start working on it now.
Yeah. And I think again, it does go back to the conversation because just because parents, have a certain plan, if part of that plan is for the siblings to be involved, whether, it's care, whether it's oversight or even acting as trustee,
Mhm.
it's making sure that the siblings are on board with that plan because downstream for me actually a lot of my active special needs trusts I took over from the sibling who did not want to be the one holding the purse strings, did not want to have to talk to brother or sister and say yes or
Right.
no to every request, distribution request. And unfortunately with all of those cases all of the relationships are ruined and
Yeah.
they're no longer talking. And that's to me is like the biggest disservice where, that's not a good plan. That should not be
No.
part of the plan.
I mean, even typical family siblings fight over money.
Yeah, yes,
And
I
so,
do.
this just adds a level of difficulty and
Yeah.
challenges when, there are fiduciaries involved, now there are lawyers involved, financial people involved. I'm sure you've seen it. It could be pretty messy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think the relationships ruined is really kind of the piece where it does break my heart
Yeah,
because, these are, now I'm working with, a lot of times, most of the time they're seniors with
sure.
disabilities and sure they have a care team, But, if their sibling was still able to kind of be kind of just like you're sharing in your family's example, the brothers are able to be that
Yep.
extra set of eyes and protective. I welcome that. I have a lot of, also the other example is I have a lot of siblings where they're named as trust protectors. I'm guessing you're
Yep.
familiar with that term too. And I think it's great because you're not burdening, the sibling with this responsibility of managing the day-to-day with the trust administration and potentially jeopardize the relationship, but they're still
Yeah.
at the table, they're still part of the team. And it's also like that extra set of oversight if the
Yeah,
plan kind of fails.
exactly. Give people the option to be involved as much as they can. Not everybody has the skill set to be a caregiver. I mean, this
Yeah.
personal experience, my dad went
Mm.
into assisted living and he went into hospice. My brothers and I are not natural caregivers. It was great that, he went into an assisted living place and they took phenomenal care of him. And, we visited him on a regular basis. When my wife went down there, she's a natural caregiver. We have a friend who owns a home health agency, right? So she would tell us what needs to be done, and we're like, okay, let's get it done because we didn't know,
That's
and,
great.
and we all need somebody when this stuff happens, we all need somebody that we can call upon and trust, right? Because it can be overwhelming. Like if you're a sibling and you now are responsible for your sibling with a disability and you've really not been involved this whole time. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. There could be a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, a lot of emotions involved. And then you add money into that mix.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
can just add to it. I think the other thing too is, kind of that scenario where if one of the children, or maybe it's the special needs trust, receives more, or also what I find is, with my beneficiaries with SNTs, sometimes they just never were aware of the trust, and sometimes that's appropriate. It doesn't make sense to let them know proactively for whatever reason, but they never kind of can get on board with the fact that they'll never have kind of
Right.
access to the funds. And so that can be for me and the team, a bit more work where it's really educating them like, oh, this is really what your parents wanted. And, they set this up, obviously from this place of love.
Yeah.
And, obviously if they're receiving public benefits,
Yeah.
that always helps. Where we're like, you can keep receiving all of these benefits that you need, very much so. Hopefully they're on board
Hopefully.
with
Yeah.
that.
That is true. There's something called, I'm sure you've heard of it, called a letter of intent.
Yeah, I love that. And even, for me, again, just putting on the trustee hat, when I'm
Yep.
administering trust with a letter of intent, it really helps me know, okay, this is what
Right.
the family wanted, because it's not all the legal jargon,
Yeah.
right?
It's beyond that. It's more of a playbook, right? If you had to
Yeah,
give somebody a
yeah,
manual
yeah.
on your child with listing their likes, their don't likes, their preferences, the doctors, the medication, everything, school in one place, and just say, okay, you're now in charge, you're now, guardian. Would you rather them not having a playbook or having a playbook?
It makes such a world of difference, right? We can just see where it's like it's a night and day difference where people have that or they don't, and then you make
Right,
your best
right. I'm sure
guess.
you have to deal with it all the time if you don't get a letter of intent or directions or something, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really with my work. It's like I'm either
Yep.
working with families that had a plan or I'm working with families that did not plan.
Sure.
And that's where, usually things are, going through the courts and it's a mess or people are fighting over everything and the court needs to get involved
Right.
and put a neutral party in. And I think so, over the years, that's so much of why I wanted to launch this podcast and have conversations like this, because if I can speak to people, years, decades
Right.
before they ever need services, I think that that's where the best return is,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. You just Look, we're all human, right? We don't want to think about these things, so we put them off because they could be not pleasant.
Yeah, well, that's kind of I think the kind of trifecta of, estate planning. Like
right,
we have to think about our money. We have to, right? A big taboo. We have to
right.
think about our own mortality. And then the family
Sure.
and relationship dynamics. All of these things are,
No,
they're not fun.
no, they're not, but
It's
they're
not
just
fun.
necessary conversations to have. And, if you can get people to have a family meeting and conversations about it. I remember working
Um,
with a family once where, I educated the parents on the purpose of a special needs trust, why they should. I mean, one of the things that most people don't do is they go back to things they already own, life insurance, 401ks, IRAs, anything that passes by beneficiary designation. You need to make sure that your child is not named as a beneficiary, but the special needs trust for their benefit is named as the beneficiary. So people go back to their, company and their benefits and they make those changes. And one of the things we share people do is they go, once they have the trust created, is go to family members and say, look, if you're going to leave money to my child, here's how you need to do it. Well, there was one grandparent who said, absolutely not. I'm leaving everything outright to Dominic.
oh no.
And the mother and I were floored. Like I said to the mother, I said, like, I can't help you anymore. I mean, I can help you with the planning and stuff, but if she doesn't want to do it, you can't force her to do it.
Well, it's going to end up being a first
It
party
is. It's just
SNT,
going to be
right?
more work and it's going to be
Yeah, that's what it'll be.
more expensive. And then
More
the state gets
expensive
paid back,
and
Medicaid, and it's going to
oh,
be a mess. And
yeah.
sometimes people want to do what they want to do, and yeah, we
Yeah,
can only
we can
guide them
only
so
do so
much. So,
much. Right. Well, as we wrap up this conversation, for the families that,
right.
don't yet have a plan, the kind of the example that you shared before where, they're in their daily grind of supporting their child with a disability. They know that they need a plan. Do you have kind of any wisdom to share
Sure.
of where to start? I mean, are you finding that it's more helpful to start with an attorney or even reaching out and reaching to you can kind of
Yeah.
then spread
Yeah.
to
So I can
creating a
share with you a
team?
resource guide that I have and a whole bunch of other, brochures and things that you could share and disseminate. And
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, we'll include that in the show notes.
here's something that, it's a resource guide. I believe that starting with a financial professional, right, is the way to start because working with an attorney to draft the documents takes a long time.
It does.
Decisions need
Yeah.
to be made. Who's going to be trustee? Who's going to be trust protector? Who's going to be guardian? Right? What if we don't have a
It's the
relative? So
hardest, right?
a lot of
Yeah.
decisions and choices need to be made before the attorney even drafts the documents. And that could take 6 months or a year sometimes. So if you start with a financial
Yeah.
professional who specializes in this area, and you could find them by going to the Academy of Special Needs Planners. You can go to the American College where they have a designation, which I have called the Chartered Special Needs Consultant, which is a professional designation for people, and work with somebody who knows what they're doing, right? And when you go to an attorney, you don't go to an attorney who closed on your real estate or your business or got you out of a ticket,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
you really want to work with people where
right.
this is their specialty.
I didn't get my
Yeah.
hips replaced
Yeah,
by my general
absolutely.
practitioner. I went to, the best orthopedic surgeon I knew, right? It'd be interesting. So, but start somewhere. Know, or at least understand or do the research that special needs trust, a third party trust, may make sense to protect for government benefits. You can't, the child should not have more than $2,000 in their name. And if they do, there are ways to then move it out of their name. You want to then take a look at the most efficient and effective way to fund the special needs trust is the use of permanent life insurance. But any life insurance is a great start because if something happens to you or your spouse, money needs to come into your family's financial world. You can't replace who they are as people. You can't replace the memories, but you can replace the economic engine, and that's money.
Mhm.
And then coordinate a
Yeah.
plan. And so what I've found, I mean, I'm being biased here, is the financial professionals, they become the quarterback to everything. because they should know
Yeah.
everything that's going on. They should know and coordinate with a special needs lawyer. They coordinate with the your company's benefits. They make sure that your 401k and your investments are hopefully right. We have a philosophy where, what we use is we use a third-party money manager that builds their portfolios based upon the academics of investing, Nobel Prize winning philosophies and principles, as opposed to speculating and gambling with your money.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. We do
No,
not want to do
no. So
that.
we want to make sure. So that's why the financial professional, in my mind, can be the quarterback, right, to all of this.
Michael, well, I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. I've taken away so much from this conversation.
Yeah,
I'm just really glad that we've finally connected. It's funny that we connected this way. I'm surprised we haven't
circles,
connected
right?
sooner just in our
Yeah,
our small circle. We'll have to have you back.
we can.
We'll see kind of what the feedback is, and I'm sure there'll be follow-up
Yeah,
questions, right, with everything we talked about. But again, I just want to really thank you for coming on the podcast. This has been wonderful, such a great resource. We'll include all the ways to
it,
find you and also the resources you mentioned in the show notes for listeners.
yeah. That'd be awesome. And what you can also even put in is we offer a free consultation. So if a family just wants to, I'll share with you my calendar link. People can just click on, schedule a half hour, talk about them, talk about their family, and that's one of the ways that we're able to provide value for this community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.